Have you ever, finished reading a super dense philosophy book or maybe some long cultural theory article, and in that exact moment you felt completely enlightened?
Oh, absolutely. Like you just unlocked the secrets of the universe.
Right, you feel like you have the keys to everything, but then maybe a few hours later you're just staring out the window on your commute and you realize you feel, well, faintly unwell.
Yeah, like a weird intellectual indigestion.
Exactly. And worse, you realize you couldn't actually summarize a single concrete argument you just read, like if your life depended on it.
It's it is a very specific, almost universal feeling when you engage with high theory. I mean, it's kind of like having a massive, incredibly rich meal at 4 in the morning.
Oh man, yeah.
You're just completely full, totally lethargic even. But if someone actually asked you to name a single ingredient you just consumed, you would come up completely empty.
And usually, when you hit that wall with philosophy, the instinct is to immediately blame yourself. You sit there and think, well, I must just not be smart enough to get this.
Right, the old imposter syndrome kicks in.
Yeah, but what if that feeling of fullness, combined with total emptiness, isn't actually a failure on your part? What if it's a perfectly designed, highly reproducible effect of the text itself?
Now that is the fascinating question.
It really is. So today we're doing a deep dive into one of the most famous living philosophers in the world, Slavoj Žižek. I mean, he's published over 50 books.
He's arguably the most visible cultural theorist alive today. You see him in movies, he fills massive lecture halls, and he just totally dominates academic debates.
Yeah, and people tend to either blindly admire the guy or completely dismiss him as a total fraud.
But the thing is, very few people actually take the time to, count the claims he's making.
Yeah.
Until now. Today we are exploring a book called Decaf Revolution, the sublime object of Slavoj Žižek, which is written by the author Boris Kriger.
And the whole mission of this deep dive today is to explore what is entirely new and original in Boris Kriger's approach to evaluating complex thought.
Yes, and it's a wildly different approach than what we're used to.
Totally. Now, just real quick before we get into the weeds here, we are going to be talking about Marxism, capitalist critiques, and, some pretty charged political theories today.
The light stuff, right?
Just casual conversation. But as a reminder to you listening, we aren't here to endorse the philosopher's politics or Boris Kriger's critiques for that matter. Our goal is strictly to unpack the mechanics of the arguments presented in the source material.
Yeah, we are purely looking at how these ideas are built. We're definitely not taking a side on whether their politics are right or wrong.
That is a crucial distinction, I think, because what is completely new and original in Boris Kriger's work is that he actually doesn't do standard literary or political criticism.
No, he doesn't at all. He's not just arguing with the specific politics or the dense Lacanian psychoanalytic theory.
Right, so what does he actually do?
Well, instead, Boris Kriger performs this structural audit of the texts. He actually borrows tools from the hard sciences, so from physics, cosmology, and complex systems theory, to measure the actual load-bearing capacity of these philosophical arguments.
I love that phrase. He is bringing laboratory hygiene to philosophy. Instead of just shouting past the philosopher, Boris Kriger wants to separate the theoretical fog from the actual durable insights.
And to figure out why this dense theory leaves us feeling full but, empty-handed, we really have to start with a totally unique analytical tool that Boris Kriger invented. He calls it the joke audit.
The joke audit. Okay, break that down for us.
Yeah, so it's this fascinating and original method. Anyone who has read or watched this philosopher knows he is famous for using jokes to make his points.
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Right. He tells this elaborate joke, the audience laughs, and then he delivers this massive philosophical claim, writing right on the back of that punchline.
Sneaking the medicine in with the sugar.
Exactly. But what Boris Kriger does, which is so simple yet entirely original, is he strips the joke away completely. He just removes it to see if the underlying claim actually survives on its own.
Okay, let's actually test this out. Let's look at a specific example from the source material. There is that famous joke the philosopher uses about a man in a mental asylum who genuinely believes he is a grain of seed.
Right, the seed joke. So the doctors treat this man for months, they do intense therapy, they give him all this medication, and eventually he's cured. He finally realizes he's a human man, not a piece of seed.
I think a major breakthrough.
Total breakthrough. The doctors are thrilled, so they discharge him. But minutes after leaving the building, he runs back inside, absolutely terrified. He says there is a chicken outside.
And the doctors say, well, you're a man. You have nothing to fear from a chicken.
Exactly. And the man replies, yes, I know I'm a man. But does the chicken know?
It is a great joke. It always gets a laugh. But Boris Kriger says, okay, let's run the audit, let's remove the chicken, remove the asylum, and look at the actual sociological claim being made here.
And what's left when you do that?
Well, the underlying claim is that a belief can continue to operate in a social arrangement even after the individuals within that arrangement have stopped holding the belief themselves. Like, the belief is stored in the social arrangement itself, not just in the individual's head.
Right. And Boris Kriger points out that when you strip away the humor there, that core claim absolutely survives. It's a solid, totally verifiable claim about how human institutions and social structures actually work.
So the joke basically upgraded a dry sociological observation into a moment of delight, but structurally the claim holds up perfectly without it.
Exactly. But then Boris Kriger audits another one. The philosopher uses a classic Marx Brothers joke in one of his books. It goes, he may look like an idiot and talk like an idiot, but don't let that fool you. He really is an idiot.
Okay, and what does the philosopher use that one for?
He uses this joke to claim that the truth may lie precisely at the surface, and that the profound depth we constantly search for is really just an ideological fantasy.
Interesting. But what happens when Boris Kriger runs his audit on that?
Well, when Boris Kriger runs his highly original audit on this specific passage, he finds something very different. If you remove the Marx Brothers from that equation, there is essentially no checkable claim left at all.
Wait, really? Nothing survives.
Nothing concrete. The leftover statement is basically just an instruction to be suspicious of suspicion. I mean, it doesn't exclude any actual state of affairs in the real world. You can't prove it false.
I see. So in this case, the joke wasn't decorating the argument. The joke was the entire content.
Precisely.
I do have to push back a little here, though. I mean, is Boris Kriger just being the fun police? Does he think philosophy should be totally humorless, dry, and read like a stereo manual?
Yeah, that's a fair question, because a lot of people read this stuff specifically because it is so entertaining.
Right. I mean, I want to be entertained while I learn.
But Boris Kriger's original takeaway is actually far more nuanced than just telling philosophers to stop joking. He argues that in these dense texts, humor is actually a structural necessity.
A necessity? How so?
Well, Boris Kriger introduces this concept of semantic destabilization. You have to think about it in terms of cognitive load. When you have a highly complex system like, say, a reader's brain, trying to interpret an overwhelming, contradictory amount of information, there is a major risk of that system settling on one interpretation too early and basically closing itself off.
Okay, so it's kind of like a computer freezing up because it has way too many tabs open.
That is the perfect analogy, yes. And a joke is the cheapest, most efficient known method to hold two incompatible frames open at the exact same time without collapsing either of them.
So the absurdity basically acts as a cognitive maintenance operation to keep the mind open and processing.
Exactly. It keeps the tabs from crashing.
Okay, that makes sense. But why is that a problem for the philosophy itself?
Because, as Boris Kriger warns, we as readers get tricked by the tempo of the humor. We experience the physical pleasure of the joke in a split second.
Yeah, that quick hit of dopamine.
And because our brain registers that aha moment of understanding the punchline, we mistakenly feel like a profound philosophical truth has just been verified. But the actual verification of the claim gets postponed indefinitely.
Wow. So you read a 300-page book, you experienced this enormous sense of intellectual richness from all the humor and the paradoxes, but when you sit down to write out the actual concrete propositions, you literally can't.
You come up empty.
Okay, so if the joke is often just the packaging masking the lack of a verifiable claim, that still doesn't explain how this philosopher manages to write 50 massive books about completely different topics.
From movies to history to current events, yeah.
Right, using that same packaging. How on earth is he generating so much volume?
And that brings us to what is entirely new and original in Boris Kriger's methodology. He asks a question borrowed straight from complex systems theory. He asks, how compressible is this body of work?
Compressibility, like zipping a file on your computer.
Exactly like that. It's a way of measuring information. If a massive output, like 50 books spanning thousands of pages, can actually be regenerated from a very short set of rules, then those rules are the actual content. Everything else is just generated packaging.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Are we really saying that a 300-page book on deep political theory is essentially generated by a simple algorithmic formula? Because, I mean, that sounds incredibly reductive.
It does sound reductive first.
Yeah, how does Boris Kriger account for the actual varied cultural analysis this philosopher is doing in all those books?
Well, Boris Kriger accounts for it by mapping out what he calls a grammar of moves. He uniquely identifies that the philosopher is not starting from scratch with each new topic. Instead, he's essentially using a 12-move mechanical system.
Right, a 12-move system.
Yeah, and he's simply feeding whatever topic happens to be in the news straight into that machine.
Okay, I want to actually test this machine right now. I want to see if we can generate high theory on the fly.
Let's do it.
Let's take something totally mundane, completely unrelated to philosophy. Let's take the supermarket self-checkout kiosk, like the source suggests.
Perfect. Let's apply Boris Kriger's grammar of moves.
Okay, the first move Boris Kriger identifies is the inversion. So I start by taking the common complaint and flipping it. I'd say everyone complains that the self-checkout eliminates working-class jobs, but this complaint is merely a comfortable ideological screen.
Nice start.
Thanks. The true scandal is not that a worker was replaced. It is that you, the customer, have been recruited as an unpaid worker and subtly made to enjoy your own autonomy.
I mean, it sounds like real theory already. Now you have to add the second move, the obscene supplement.
Right. Okay. The official rule is that the machine is there for your convenience. But the unwritten obscene rule is that you are instantly treated as a probable thief, constantly monitored by cameras and frozen in place until a supervisor clears your scanned avocados.
Brilliant. And then you execute the final move, the sweeping political conclusion.
Okay, here we go. Therefore, the self-checkout is not a symptom of a capitalist system that no longer needs us. It is the training ground of a system that needs us to volunteer for our own subjugation.
You literally just wrote a paragraph of high-level cultural theory in about 40 seconds.
And it sounds incredibly convincing. I mean, I almost believe it myself. But Boris Kriger's point here is that there are no actual independent facts in that paragraph we just generated.
None at all.
Yeah.
It is purely a mechanical application of form to a totally random subject.
Wow.
And that leads to what is really new and original in Boris Kriger's approach to testing these theories. He brings in a tool borrowed directly from cosmology called the rank test.
The rank test, how does that work?
So in cosmology, when you are looking at a massive field of stars, you might see hundreds of flashes of light. You need to know, are those 100 independent supernovas actually happening?
No.
Or is just one single light source bouncing off 100 different dust clouds?
Right, because if it's just one light source bouncing off dust and you record it as 100 different events, your data is completely corrupted.
Precisely. So if a theory produces a suspicious abundance of agreements, like when it can perfectly explain everything from Alfred Hitchcock movies to the layout of European toilets to the sinking of the Titanic, you really have to ask yourself a question.
Are those hundreds of independent sociological results or just reflections?
Exactly. Are they mathematically correlated by the construction of the theory itself?
To make this visceral, Boris Kriger uses this brilliant analogy of a lamp. Imagine a single bright lamp shining from behind a spinning wheel of colored glass filters.
Okay, picture that.
The wall lights up red, then it lights up amber, then blue, then green. An observer sitting in the room taking notes might record dozens of distinct, unique color events. But honestly, it is just one lamp.
And Boris Kriger's highly original conclusion here is that this massive philosophical corpus is what physicists would call rank 1.
Rank 1, meaning just one source.
Yes, it is a single measurement. It's a single ideological observation taken decades ago, reported repeatedly in hundreds of different costumes.
So every single time this 12-move machine looks at a movie or a political crisis, it miraculously finds the exact same thing, a hidden antagonism covered over by ideology.
Every single time.
Hold on, though. Let me make sure I actually understand the implications of this. If all these books are just one lamp shining through different colored filters, what exactly is the lamp?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. What is the core thing he is pointing at? And if it's really just a generated trick, why have brilliant critics and academics failed for 30 years to successfully debunk it?
Well, to answer why it hasn't been debunked, we have to look at Boris Kriger's most powerful conceptual tool. He introduces a distinction between a deferred referent and a foreclosed referent.
Okay, deferred versus foreclosed.
Yeah, and this is entirely new to philosophical criticism, and it explains the durability of the theory perfectly.
Wait, let me try to ground this so it's not too abstract. A referent is just the thing a word or a theory is pointing to in the real world, right?
Exactly.
So it's kind of like tracking a package. A deferred referent is like having an order number. I know the delivery truck is on the road. I know the supplier is a real company. The package just, isn't here yet.
That is an excellent way to put it. In
Ugh.
the hard sciences, deferred reference happen all the time. Think about the neutrino in physics.
Oh, right.
In 1930, Wolfgang Pauli noticed that energy was missing from his equations during radioactive decay. So he created a placeholder concept, a deferred referent, called the neutrino.
He couldn't measure it yet, but he knew exactly what properties it had to have to balance the math.
Exactly. And 26 years later, physicists actually detected it in a lab. The delivery truck finally arrived. Astronomers did the exact same thing when they mathematically calculated the existence of the planet Neptune based on gravity, long before their telescopes were powerful enough to actually see it.
Okay, so the science was just waiting on reality to catch up and provide the object. But a foreclosed referent is completely different.
Totally different.
If a deferred referent is waiting for a real delivery, a foreclosed referent is like waiting for a delivery from a company that literally does not exist. It's for a product that was never manufactured, and the tracking number is just entirely made up.
Yes. And what is new and original in Boris Krieger's analysis is that he proves the central concept of this entire Lacanian Marxist philosophy. The concept known as the real is structurally a foreclosed referent.
The real being that famous, super mysterious gap in psychoanalytic theory, right? Like the core trauma that language supposedly can't capture.
Exactly. The real is defined by its very construction as something that resists symbolization completely.
Meaning you can't talk about it directly?
Right. Anything you can describe, anything you can measure or point to or observe in society is by definition not the real. It is a concept built deliberately so that no conceivable instrument or observation could ever reach it.
But wait, I have to challenge this because this sounds like a genius move. If you define a philosophical concept so perfectly that it can never be measured and therefore can never be caught out or proven wrong, isn't that a sign of theoretical genius? Doesn't that make it a bulletproof theory?
Well, it definitely looks like strengths from the outside, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But Boris Kriger is really quick to explain the devastating epistemological price of this arrangement.
What's the price?
A concept that cannot fail is a concept that cannot learn. If an idea can never be measured wrongly, then nothing that actually happens in the real world counts for or against it.
Oh, I see.
You can't ask a historical question like, hey, was there more of the real in 1914 during the start of World War I than there was in 1968? Because the concept simply doesn't interact with measurable reality.
So reach without risk is not actually a theoretical bargain. It is just an illusion of knowledge.
Exactly. And this perfectly explains why Boris Kriger says the critics have completely missed the target for 30 years. You have these famous thinkers, giants like Noam Chomsky or John Gray, who have aggressively attacked this philosopher for a lack of empirical evidence or, for shifting his arguments constantly.
But as Boris Kriger points out, those critics are essentially asking for the delivery truck.
Yes, they are demanding empirical evidence of an object that was foreclosed by definition on page 1. The critics are formally correct in their complaints about the lack of evidence, but structurally, they are completely beside the point.
Because they are trying to audit and abolish debt. They are trying to weigh an object that the theory itself proudly admits doesn't have mass.
Which is an impossible task.
Okay, let's take a breath and just look at where we are. The core object of the theory is a foreclosed referent that can't be measured. The output is generated by a rank 1 12-move machine. And the jokes are really just cognitive packaging.
It sounds pretty bleak when you list it all out like that.
It does. I think a lot of people at this point might just throw their hands up and say, well, throw the whole thing out. It's all just a parlor trick. But Boris Kriger specifically promises early in the book that an audit without a remainder is a waste of an evening. He's not just here for a demolition job.
No, he absolutely isn't. And this is where what is new and original in Boris Kriger's work truly shines. He basically performs a salvage operation.
A salvage operation. I like that.
Yeah, he strips away all the heavy Lacanian psychoanalytic jargon, he unplugs that 12-move machine, and he manages to rescue 3 incredibly durable, vital claims about society that genuinely survive the audit.
And what I found so fascinating reading this was that Boris Kriger traces these three surviving claims back, not to abstract philosophy, but to the philosopher's unique biographical testimony.
Yes, his personal history is key here.
The philosopher grew up in Yugoslavia, right, living under a communist state system that literally nobody actually believed in anymore, but that absolutely everybody participated in anyway.
And that historical testimony is totally irreplaceable. It actually forms the bedrock of the first claim Boris Kriger rescues, which is this: belief is located in our practice, not in our statements.
We really need to unpack this one because it is so incredibly relevant to everyday life right now. I mean, think about a modern corporate employee going to one of those mandatory, extremely cheesy team-building seminars.
Well, we've all been there.
Right. They are writing company core values on brightly colored sticky notes. At lunch, they lean over and tell you the whole exercise is total nonsense. The consultants running it are absolute charlatans, and they don't believe a single word of it.
But, and this is the crucial, somewhat chilling part that Boris Kriger highlights, they still go back after lunch and write on the sticky notes.
Yep. They hand them in on time in the correct colors straight to the manager.
And Boris Kriger uses this insight to prove that the employee's internal contempt is actually not a form of resistance.
Yeah.
In fact, their internal contempt is the psychological lubricant that makes their outward compliance bearable.
Wow. So the corporate institution doesn't actually need them to believe in the mission statement in their hearts. The institution just needs the physical sticky notes. The physical compliance is the belief, completely regardless of what's going on in their head.
Internal rebellion as a tool for external compliance. It's a heavy thought.
It really is. And that leads directly to the second rescued claim, which is the concept of the obscene supplement.
Yes. Boris Kriger notes that every institution, whether it's a college fraternity or a massive corporation or a government, runs on two sets of rules.
Two sets.
Right. There's the official written handbook, and then there is the hidden, unwritten, obscene supplement that you actually have to follow if you want to survive and fit in.
Give me an example of how that works in practice for people listening.
Sure. Let's think about corporate culture again. The official handbook explicitly says, we value work-life balance, and we encourage taking all your vacation days.
But the obscene supplement, the unwritten rule everyone actually follows, is that if you take more than 3 days off in a row, you are viewed as totally uncommitted and you're passed over for promotion.
Exactly. And Boris Kriger points out that this unwritten space is where the true cruelty of an institution lives. Because, you can't file an HR complaint against a rule that literally isn't written down anywhere.
Oh, that's insidious. But paradoxically, navigating that obscene supplement together is also where true belonging and camaraderie among the workers is actually formed.
Yeah, you basically bond over the shared trauma of the unwritten rules.
Which brings us to the third and final surviving claim, and I think this one is a real gut punch for anyone who considers themselves politically aware: the trap of cynical distance.
This is perhaps the most profound sociological insight Boris Kriger rescues from the whole corpus. We generally tend to think that if we can see through a corrupt or broken system, if we are deeply ironic and cynical about how flawed it is, that our awareness somehow frees us from it.
Right, we feel superior to the system because we see its flaws. We get the joke.
But Boris Kriger proves that cynical distance doesn't weaken the arrangement at all. In fact, it might be the very structural pillar holding it up.
Wait, how does being cynical hold the system up?
Well, the cynic who sees completely through the broken system but still wakes up and participates in it every single day is functionally identical to the brainwashed zealot who truly believes in it.
Oh, wow. To the system, their output is exactly the same. The cynic and the zealot are equally immobile.
Exactly. And this raises a wildly important question about how we actually try to enact change in society. What is entirely new and original in Boris Kriger's takeaway here is his conclusion that simply informing people is a very weak instrument of change.
So if you want to change a toxic workplace or a broken political system, just writing articles explaining to people that the system is broken won't actually do anything?
Nothing at all. Because knowing better doesn't change the physical habits and the daily practices that sustain the institution. The knowledge remains entirely inert unless the actual cost of changing your physical behavior drops.
That makes so much sense. So Boris Kriger shows that the true value of this philosopher isn't the complex, unmeasurable theory of the real. The true value is his irreplaceable, verified testimony about how human compliance actually works.
It is a complete paradigm shift in how we read and evaluate theory. Boris Kriger's Decaf Revolution really gives us a totally new scientific way to evaluate dense philosophy.
Yeah, by utilizing joke audits, cosmological rank tests, and defining the boundaries of foreclosed reference, Boris Kriger actually manages to clear away the theoretical fog and the unmeasurable packaging. He hands us these highly durable, practical insights about human behavior.
And in doing so, he actually honors the philosopher's work. I mean, he takes it seriously enough to rigorously measure it, rather than just blindly praising it or lazily dismissing it. And honestly, that is the highest form of intellectual respect.
It really is. And as we wrap up this deep dive today, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought taken directly from Boris Kriger's conclusion. I want you to think about a persistent problem in your own life this past week.
Something you perfectly understand. Maybe you even eloquently complained about it to a friend over coffee, analyzing exactly why it is a problem and how it started.
And yet, despite that perfect understanding, you did absolutely nothing to actually change your physical behavior to fix it. Boris Kriger challenges you to realize that your brilliant, articulate description of the problem was not a step towards solving it. In reality, your beautiful description is exactly what replaced the solution.